Hello everyone, welcome to our third video for our series in oral communication in context. During the last video, we have discussed the different models of communication. We have to recall that there were three models that we were able to tackle. The first one is the Shannon-Weaver model, and the second one is, of course, the Scrum model, and the third is the transactional model. Through those models, we were able to see how the communication process flows and how we can make sure that the communication process succeeds. For this video, we will be dealing with the different communication breakdown. So this is your lesson 3 for oral communication in context. Before we have the discussion, may I request you to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so that you get updated whenever we have new uploads. Right? Thank you so much. So again, I've mentioned that our video focuses on the different communication breakdown. And in Module 2, you have learned about the models of communication. You have realized how different elements of communication work together to achieve a successful communication process, right? So those were the things that we were able to tackle. Today, we will be dealing with the different communication breakdown. Communication is a process of exchanging thoughts, ideas, and opinions in order to connect with people. Of course, we already know about that. Its goal is to achieve a clear and effective understanding resulting to good relationships in the community. However, there are times when this goal is not reached due to certain factors. And these factors are the ones that we're going to discuss in this video. When this happens, there is communication breakdown. Communication breakdown is when a particular communication process is hindered by different factors. And these factors are what we call the barriers to communication. Alright? So what are the barriers to communication? Okay? We have the physical barrier, physical, psychological, cultural, linguistic, and of course, we also have here the different barriers as classified by Verderber 1991. Okay? So let's start with the first one, which is the physical barriers. What are physical barriers, by the way? Physical barriers, my dear learners, are the natural or environmental condition that act as a barrier in communication in sending the message from sender to the receiver. What are the examples of physical barriers? Number one is people talking too loud. Is it not that when we had the face-to-face classes, your teachers would always say, you keep quiet, right? Because whenever other students would keep talking while the teacher is discussing, the other students may get disturbed, right? Especially when they are talking too loud. So that's number one example. Number two is noise from a construction site. Okay, that's just an example, by the way. And the loud sound of a karaoke or blaring of jeepney horns. For example, you are talking with someone over the phone while riding on a jeepney. What do you usually do? Sometimes you would actually say, I will call you after 10 minutes. Tawagan na lang kita ha pag nakababa na ako ng jeep kasi medyo maingay. Diba? Or you are riding on a motorcycle. 'Di ba kapag nakasakay ka ng motor tapos may kausap ka sa phone, 'di ba? Naririnig yung hangin. So that is one of the examples of physical barriers. Okay? That is one of the examples of physical barriers. So, physical barriers are natural or environmental condition. Okay? And you also have to understand that one example of a physical barrier is distance. Okay? Kung masyadong malayo yung kausap mo, there's a tendency na hindi kayo magkakaintindihan. Kaya nga minsan ang ginagamit yung sign language, di ba, kung medyo malayo. But of course, that's not yet a guarantee that the message you would want to send can be easily understood. Okay? So those are the examples of physical barriers. For our second barrier, we have psychological barriers. Psychological barriers, my dear learners, are called as mental barriers. So this is internal. Okay, this is internal by nature. They are called mental barriers. These refer to social and personal issues of a speaker towards communicating with others. What are examples of these? Trauma, shyness, lack of confidence, depression, fear, or stage fright. Okay, isa-isahin natin tong mga to. Trauma. When someone is traumatized, there is a tendency that someone would not want to talk with people. At hindi mo mapipilit yung taong yung makipag-usap sa'yo and to participate in a communication process. So that is one barrier to communication. Halimbawa, nagkulong siya sa kwarto niya. Diba? Nagkulong siya sa kwarto niya. Paano mo ngayon siya kakausapin? So that's a barrier to communication. That is something that stops the communication process, that hinders the communication process. Number 2, shyness, lack of confidence. If it's your first time to meet, definitely medyo nagkakahiyaan pa, di ba? Kailangan mo siyang tanungin. Kailangan may itanong ka sa kanya. Nahihiya siyang sumagot. Do you think you would be able to extract answers from that person na nahihiya nga? Definitely not. Okay? So those are examples of psychological barrier. Depression. Di ba? They would say that mental health is as important as our physical health. That is true. Especially nowadays that we are faced with different experiences, different situations and circumstances that would really affect our mental health. And one of which is actually depression. When one is depressed, there is a tendency that that person would not want to talk to anybody, to do things, to participate in a communication process, and all that. Fear or stage fright. For example, you were tasked to represent your class on a declamation contest. O dahil takot na takot ka, may stage fright ka, nakalimutan mo yung sasabihin mo. Diba? Like, nandun ka na sa stage, sabihin mo, my hands are wet with blood. They are crimson with the blood of a man I have just killed. I have come here today to confess. I committed murder. Deliberate, premeditated murder. I killed a man in cold blood. And that man is my master. Tapos bigla mo nang nakalimutan, di ba? So, tendency is you would not be able to deliver the message as clearly as possible when you forget the lines in your declamation piece, right? And then the third one, my dear learners, is the cultural barriers. Cultural barriers pertain to communication problems encountered by people regarding their intrinsic values or beliefs and traditions in conflict with others. People's culture affect the way they communicate and relate to others. Definitely, when we have these cultural barriers, we have to consider traditions, of course also religion, values. Okay, and examples of these are different beliefs. Diba? We have our superstitious beliefs na hindi pwedeng magwalis kapag gabi, right? Do you still believe in that? Hindi daw pwedeng magwalis na kapag gabi. Kasi daw, kapag nagwalis ka ng gabi, parang nilalabas mo daw yung swerte. But here's another person telling you na hindi yan totoo. Diba? So, there is now a disagreement. So, that may now cause breakdown in communication. Hindi yan totoo. Dahil walang scientific basis yan. Ang katotohanan dyan is, kapag nagwalis ka ng gabi, dahil madilim, baka may maiwalis ka na maiwalis ka na mahalagang bagay. Pwedeng sing-sing, hikaw, necklace, or other. Yun naman yung agreement, yung argument niya. So, in that way, there is now a difference in belief. Diba? May pagkakaiba na sa belief. Also, we have traditions and customs, which is very much related to what I've already discussed. And of course, manners of dressing. Okay? Manners of dressing. May mga boyfriend, diba? May mga boyfriend na ayaw pasuotin yung mga jowa nila na maiiksing shorts. Anong tawag natin sa mga maiiksing shorts na ganun? Pek-pek shorts. Diba? Pek-pek shorts. Tapos, that would now become the cause of their argument. Oh, diba? So, there is now a communication breakdown. And of course, speaking. Our geographical location would actually have an influence with the way we speak. Okay? They say that those who are in the mountain province or in Baguio City would have a different way of speaking. Okay? Bakit sabihin nila naglamiismo? Like they do not usually open their mouth because their place is so cold, 'di ba? So parang sobrang ginaw na restrict yung the way they speak. So that is only one example. Na restrict yung the way they speak. So you don't usually see them really opening their mouths in full. Right? So that's when it comes to speaking. So those are examples, my dear learners, of cultural barriers. Next, we have the linguistic barriers. Linguistic barriers pertain conflicts with regard to language and word meanings. Because words carry denotative and connotative meanings, they can sometimes cause confusion and misunderstanding. Okay, let us first differentiate what denotative and connotative meaning of words are. When we speak of the denotative meaning of a word, we talk about the dictionary meaning. Okay? We talk about the dictionary meaning. When we speak of a connotative meaning, it may be a figurative meaning or it may be something that depends on the experiences or depends on the interpretation of a person. For example, we have... Meron ba akong sing-sing dito? Wait, let me check kung meron akong sing-sing dito. Meron akong sing-sing. Oh, halimbawa yung sing-sing. Ring. Okay? When we look into the dictionary meaning of a ring, pwede siyang, it is a jewelry, worn around one's finger. Okay? It is a jewelry worn around one's finger. Okay? It is a jewelry worn around one's finger. So that is the denotative meaning of ring. When we speak of connotative meaning of ring, pwede siyang marriage, pwede siyang love, pwedeng promise or loyalty or fidelity. So you can now see the difference between the denotative and the connotative meaning of words. So isa pa lang yun ha, that's ring. So let's continue. Meaning of words and symbols also vary depending on culture. You have to understand that culture is actually mentioned in linguistic barrier because when we speak of culture, it is a broader concept. And language is actually one of the things included under culture. Okay? But for the purpose of discussing the different barriers, we have taken linguistic barrier as one of the examples. So, what are examples of linguistic barriers? We have difference in language. When you are a Filipino and then you're talking to somebody who is a Korean or Chinese and you don't understand Korean or Chinese, so definitely there is a barrier to communication. Diba? There's a barrier to communication. Accents and dialect. The way we pronounce words may actually send a different message. Okay? That's because of our accent and our dialect. Sometimes also diction. Okay? Sometimes also diction. And then the use of jargon and slang terms. When we say jargon are words or terms which are specific to a particular group or profession. Okay, that's jargon. For example, when there are a certain group of doctors and they are talking about a particular disease, you don't expect that all teachers or all engineers or all architects would be able to understand that. So that particular word that they are talking about is what they call jargon. Okay? Also, when lawyers would discuss among themselves, definitely they have their own jargon. Like if they say stare decisis, if they say petition on certiorari. Of course, not everyone would be able to understand that because that is a specialized word or language in that particular group. Diba? O, paano nyo malalaman kung ano ang ibig sabihin ng motion for reconsideration? Diba? Kung anong ibig sabihin ng GR number. O, when we talk about cases. O, because those are jargons or terms, nomenclature specific to a particular group of people. When we say slang naman, ito yung mga salitang pabalbal, mga salitang kalye. Okay? I want to remove your notion na kapag slang, ay slang ka. Kapag maarte kang magsalita, slang ka na. No! Slang, my dear learners, is the use of colloquial terms or mga salitang kalye. Yun ang slang ha, hindi yung manner ng pagsasalita. Kasi baka may nakita lang kayo, the house is comfortable. Kuna ay slang, kuna yun, haan, yung kas-JT slang. Ang slang ay mga salitang kalye. O, di ba? Pag sinabi niyang char, o salitang kalye yung char. O, ano bang ibig sabihin ng char? O, di ba? Parang joke lang, hindi yung totoo, di ba? And not everyone will be able to understand that. For example, you are in court. O, diba? Yes, Your Honor, I would like to present exhibit number 1. Ay, char! Alangan ko na kasjay, di ba? Hindi pwede yun. Alangan char ko na, medjay korte. O, definitely, that's not acceptable. And that would become a reason for communication breakdown. Okay? So, what else do we use? As slang terms, diba? Ngayon, medyo social na mga mura, diba? Dati mga mura pa talaga, talagang minumura pa talaga siya. Ngayon, hindi na masyado. Diba? Shoota, ganyan, hindi na. These are colloquial terms. These are slang terms. Alright? And then, speech defects or language impairments. When we speak of speech defects or language impairments, this can also be attributed to physiological barriers. Like when one person cannot pronounce letter R. Di ba may mga ganon? May mga tao na hindi nakakapag-pronounce ng letter R ng maayos. Sabihin sana nila market. Market. Di ba? Hindi nila ma-pronounce ng maayos yung R. So, market kunada. So you don't easily understand what they would like to say. So those are examples of linguistic barriers. But of course, we have to see this because this is also important. Verderber, 1991, gives a similar idea of barriers when he classifies noise into 3 kinds. Sabi ni Verderber, there are 3 classifications of barriers. Okay? And these are external, internal, and semantic noise. Na-discuss na natin kanina itong mga to, but these are actually classifications of Verderber when he said he is going to classify noise into 3 kinds. Again, external, internal, and semantic. So, ano yung mga in-include ni Verderber sa external noises? Ang sabi ni Verderber, external noises are the sight, sound, and other stimuli that draw people's attention away from intended meaning. So, ano itong mga to? Noise of vehicles, singing at the neighborhood, visual aids in front of the classroom, the dog barking, the sound of airplane. So, nakita nyo naman, sabi niya, visual aids in front of the classroom. Kapag malayo ka, di ba, hindi mo masyadong makikita yon. So, that is also part of our physical barrier. Nakita nyo ha, you have to differentiate later on. itong external noises ni vertebra, yun ang tinatawag nating physical barriers. Doon na na-discuss natin kanina. Physical barriers yan. Itong internal noises niya, according to vertebra, internal noises are the thoughts and feelings that interfere with meaning. O, saan natin yun makikita kanina? Physical, psychological, or linguistic, or cultural? O, what's your answer? Kapag internal noises, ang example nito, confrontation with a friend, fear of speaking in front of the class, and racial prejudice. Where do we find that in the first classifications of barriers we discussed? Okay? The correct answer is psychological barrier. Okay? Itong internal noises ni vertebra ay ang tinatawag nating psychological barrier. And then the third classification, according to vertebra to ha, the third classification according to vertebra is the semantic noises. What are semantic noises? According to vertebra, semantic noises are the alternate meanings aroused by a speaker's symbols. This idea means that a word may have another meaning in the minds of the students, and this is affected by the language in which they grew and the culture they are exposed. So, for example, incorrect grammar, using excessive technical jargon, and using idiomatic expressions. So, according to vertebra, semantic noise is one of the barriers. So, kung i-compare natin ngayon ang semantic noise, saan kaya dun sa apat na na-discuss natin kanina, makikita ang similarity ng semantic noise according to vertebra? Is it physical, psychological, cultural, or linguistic? What's your answer? I want you to type your answer in the chat box. O, tignan natin if you were able to understand the concept of semantic barrier. Is it not that earlier we have 4? We have physical, psychological, semantic, and cultural and linguistic barriers, right? Tapos sabi ni vertebra, semantic noises are alternate meanings aroused by speakers' symbols. This idea means a word may have another meaning in the minds of the students. Examples: incorrect grammar, using excessive jargon, and using idiomatic expression. So, alin dun sa apat ang may kapareho ng semantic noise ni vertebra? I want you to comment your answer in the chat box. Okay? Tignan natin if you were able to understand the different communication breakdown or the different barriers to communication. Also, on a separate sheet of paper, I want you to answer this quiz I am going to give you. I'm going to read the items, but you have to write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. Directions. Identify the kind of communication barrier exemplified by each description. Tell whether it is physical, psychological, cultural, or linguistic barrier. O, apat ang pagpipilian nyo ha. Physical, psychological, cultural, or linguistic barrier. Item number 1. Lack of confidence. Again, item number 1, lack of confidence. Number 2, connotative and denotative meaning. Connotative and denotative meaning. Number 3, loud party. Number 4, different races. Again, number 4, different races. Number 5, poor lighting. Poor lighting. Number 6, lack of interest and attention. Again, number 6, lack of interest and attention. Number 7, different views and opinions. Number 7, different views and opinions. Number 8, using idiomatic expressions. Number 8, using idiomatic expressions. Number 9, information overload. Number 9, information overload. And number 10, feel frustrated. Feel frustrated. Okay, so my dear learners, those are the different barriers to communication, which are the reasons communication breakdown. Okay? These are the reasons of communication breakdown. So please don't forget to answer your modules. Of course, there are other activities I've included in the module. And then, next meeting, we'll be dealing with the different strategies to avoid this communication breakdown. Okay, in the next video, we will be dealing with the different strategies or the various strategies to avoid communication breakdown. So we have discussed physical, psychological, cultural, and language barriers, right? So these were the barriers to communication. So paano natin ngayon maiiwasan itong barriers to communication na to? Those are the things that we will discuss in our next video. So that's it for our third video. Thank you very much again for watching. And of course, to everyone who has not yet subscribed to this channel, please naman subscribe to this channel. Actually, I promised my students that I'm giving them additional points whenever we reach 1,000 subscribers. So please help my students get that additional point or those additional points. Okay? So please subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell for more updates. Thank you. Bye, everyone.